the bangers. What do you have to be able to do to be a part of the bangers? And there's one game on here that I allowed to stay on here, even though it needs to be two ranked teams. You have 2:30 Texas and Oklahoma. You have Penn State, USC. You have Ohio State, Oregon, and then Ole Miss and 13th ranked LSU. Bangers.
Is that the game you allowed to stay on there?
No, it was Penn State because USC's not ranked. You have to be ranked, and I think I may have put this together even like Saturday to get ready to make sure I didn't forget about it. But that's still kind of a banger of a game, and obviously USC in need of a win after another one this past weekend to Minnesota. Ranked teams. If you're 20 and 22 and playing each other, bangers. Texas, OU, but the highlighted game in that one is huge. Ohio State, Oregon. So, Craig Smoak, of those four, I know one. Click, it's yours. But which of those other three to you, in your opinion, are more intriguing?
Well, it's easily number 2 versus number 3. I don't think.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, I'm just asking. Yeah.
I don't know how it wouldn't be for most people unless you're a fan of the other 4 teams somehow or another. But, yeah, give me 2 versus 3 versus 4 versus unranked and, 9 versus 13, which you can debate how high those teams should actually be and whether there's some SEC soothing going on right there. But, yeah, I mean, take apart the rankings themselves. Texas, Oklahoma is always going to be my number 1. But Ohio State, Oregon, from the standpoint of it being the first Big Ten matchup between these two, being a big game in that race, and maybe a future rematch of that conference title game, or a future look into the conference title game, depending on how the rest of the season goes. That one to me is the one that's got the most juice behind it and the most potential to matter even more in the long run. So, yeah, Ohio State, Oregon to me is clearly game 1B behind Red River. But, Penn State, USC should be entertaining, and Ole Miss, LSU ought to be a heck of a game as well. So don't think there's really a wrong answer necessarily. But, yeah, give me 2-3 all day long.
Yeah, I look forward to that one, yeah.
Yeah, I think that one's going to be great. Penn State and USC, while USC is not ranked, it's still very important to both teams, especially USC, who finds themselves after being look, Lincoln Riley did something well. Now all of a sudden they can't score points, and his offense has been figured out. While the defense is playing well still and good enough for them to win these games, they keep getting beat. I mean, losing to Minnesota was something I know that nobody in Southern California thought was going to happen. So this one's super important for them.
3-2, 1-2 in the conference, and in a free fall, like a lot of teams that thought this would be a special year. Also, this is a story. Well, here are the games to let you know again in the Big 12. Coming up among the best, including another Friday game, Utah and Arizona State in Tempe. That is a game on ESPN. Saturday, games at 2:30, 3-7, and also late night games. You have Cincinnati at UCF, Arizona at BYU, and then Iowa State, West Virginia, and Morgantown. Kansas State at Colorado in Boulder against Dion and the Buffaloes.
Yeah, this is interesting slate here, too, that Kansas State-Colorado game. This is another one where, Colorado's, been moving along here the last few games for them. Kansas State's going to come in and have a style that, I would think is not what they do best at Colorado, but I was wrong about that with UCF. So this is the first game that I'm going to watch Colorado with completely maybe open eyes about who they are now going in, as opposed to any preconceived notions, because clearly they've changed some things up if they can stop the run all of a sudden, which they did against UCF.
We got a defensive stat, Craig, here in a moment and where Colorado is in this list that otherwise maybe 2 weeks ago would not have thought possible. We'll get to that in a minute.
So, somebody who covers the Big 12 and follows it pretty closely. I mean, I find all these games interesting for various reasons, but certainly got, 4 ranked teams out there trying to defend that ranking, or if not, get a little bit higher. I think Utah, on the road on a Friday night with will Cam Rising play, will he not play, that stupid, tired storyline, that in play does make it a little bit more of a wild card. If he does, though, that's notable. If he doesn't, it's notable. It's just, again, the second straight year where that's like the predominant storyline with Utah football. But they need a win, and Kenny Dillingham and company, I'm sure, are going to be super fired up. I don't know how great the crowd will be, but that's, just interesting. Friday night on the road against a competitive team. Then, Cincy UCF, that's probably the least spotlighted game because it's the only non-ranked game whatsoever, but both teams could really use this win and position themselves a little higher in the hierarchy of the Big 12. I think UCF especially is kind of smarting right now. So being at home, will this game even get played? That I don't even know. Like, what do they have alternative plans for the Hurricane? Because it's kind of hard to picture how this is going to, not be affected in some way. But if it's not, then, that's a game for UCF to certainly try and get back on track. Arizona, BYU. Arizona's so up and down, but any game against BYU now, whoever it is going to be interesting because they're on top of the hill. So everybody's trying to knock them down or bring them back down to everybody else's level since they've got off to that hot start. And I know there's Iowa State and Texas Tech and so on, but that goes for all those teams that you want to see them get beat and shake up these rankings a little bit. West Virginia at home in Morgantown against Iowa State. That's interesting. And then I think that the best game, certainly the nightcap, K-State and Colorado. That's one I'm very much looking forward to. If it was in Manhattan, I'd still be interested, but the fact it's in Boulder makes me way more interested, just that the K-State's got to contend with some kind of a home field advantage potentially. So I'd take them straight up or at home, but in Boulder, I don't know, that makes it a little bit more intriguing to me. So, that's going to be really interesting, and can't wait to see Shador against that K-State defense and then Avery Johnson and kind of the back and forth there. That's going to be fun.
I tell you this, these late Saturday night games, which are great because it's pretty much one of the only games going on, including last week with Tech and Arizona, is squeezing my sleep time, but because it's hard to go to bed when there's a damn competitive game on, and especially when teams that we cover within the Big 12. So this is a story, and we mentioned yesterday about the House versus NCAA settlement, at least the first big hurdle. Not that all of them aren't big, but the first big hurdle with Judge Wilkin giving her basically okay for them to move on with many things that still need to be ironed out. And she is not afraid to tell either side, no, go back and do this again. But she did that, and they did it, and they've moved on. So while this is going on, which is probably what in the end is going to end up being what basically runs college football with the money being paid back, the money moving forward, the revenue, et cetera, there continues to be these thoughts of and ideas of what else can college football do. I don't think this has a chance in hell. I don't think any of the leagues, the super leagues, have a chance. I wish it was possible, but I don't. But the latest one is a group of investors and ex-Disney executives, and Ross Dellinger will join us today at 5:10, met with ADs at 30 power schools with a pitch of a $9 billion infusion as part of a 70-school football league. Looming over SEC and Big Ten meetings is Project Bully. They're going to meet this Thursday, the SEC and Big Ten. The claim is everybody will be saved. Now, Paul, before you respond, and Craig, Paul sent a quote in the article from a high-level SEC school administrator. The smash capital, which is what he's talking about, is brilliant. The idea is brilliant, but you've got to convince those two guys, which is the Big Ten and the SEC commissioner, and I don't see them budging. I don't, even with the money involved, but at least somebody's trying to find an alternative plan.
I think this one is the best plan that we've seen because it hits all the things that the big boys would want, and it keeps the Power Four together and then sets us on a path of where I think things are going anyway. You've already heard the G5 coming up with their own playoff. I think that is the most realistic option because there's not just an endless flow of money that you can give to 200 college football teams. You just can't. So if the big money maker is going to stay the big money makers and do that, then let's create tiers of this that make sense. And for the fans, I don't think anybody wants to see a league that's just the Big Ten and SEC. So if we can do this 70-team league that makes more sense, that has better scheduling and all those different things, yes. I think the things that make this thing work are, one, $9 billion in capital. That's where it gets people to the table. Where Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti aren't going to want it is one media rights deal shared among everybody. The tiering off of that means that, yeah, the haves will continue to have, but if they don't have a good year, they won't make as much money. And then that means he's got to go to, they each have to go to half their teams and be like, some years you're going to make $60 million. Some years you're going to make $140, but it just depends on how good you are at all of this and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's very telling, the state of college football, that you have a lot of people that are in favor of something like this, but two people ultimately make the decision, and that's Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti. And Greg Sankey, every single move he makes tells you he does not give a flip about anybody else with the SEC.
Yeah, I'll give them some of the power. The networks have more say than anybody, though. Yeah. I feel like the networks are the ones that are driving this as much as anybody. I know that Snakey walks on water for some people Southeast, and then Petitti's just a big figure who kind of stays in the background more so, but they're not doing anything without TV. You want to say it's split into fours. That's perfectly fine to say, but to your point, yeah, like if they don't sign off on it, those two leagues, then it's not happening. And so same thing as even if they were on board, but the TV networks don't want to do it, it's not happening. So you got to have everybody. But from the college personnel side of things, like we know TV is going to sign off on it because there's no way they're not part of these discussions to begin with. And we know what they want, which is the best football games possible. That's what everything's getting geared towards. Why add another SEC conference game? More money, more TV money, bigger matchup. Why add Oklahoma, Texas to the SEC? More money, bigger TV, like that. Everything's being driven by TV. So here's another idea where TV would get its cake and eat it too, thanks to private equity. Now, would Sankey and Petitti be on board with that? Yeah, I don't know about that, because why not just pivot and do something similar just all by themselves? Why include 40 other teams or 30 other teams when they don't need to, potentially? Like, that's the thing about kind of having a proposal out there like this, is what prevents somebody from going, that's interesting, I think I'll take part of that, and go twist that and go put it in front of ESPN and say, hey, what do you think of this idea? So I'm sure there will be many coming up with alternatives, but on the surface of it, like, it's great if you're a power school fan of the Power Four. Like, if your team fits within that right now, then you'd presumably be safe under this very unofficial and maybe won't even happen idea. I don't know what it means for the Pac, because it says 70 schools. If you do the math, it comes out to like 68 through the Power Four. And then there's obviously more than two teams now in the Pac, and they're not included in this write-up that I saw, at least. So I don't know what that means for them. But regardless, it's an interesting idea. There's a lot of like big ideas holding weight, like the private equity piece. There's a lot of people who don't seem to be all that certain about this, and a lot of questions about whether or not the biggest of the bigwigs would sign off on it. So I don't know how realistic it is, but it's very clear that everybody's circling, trying to come up with an alternative to what we actually have. And what we actually have looks like it's an endangered species at this point, because there's some trimming going on. There's a lot of trimming going on, and it's all about bigger games, bigger money, bigger TV ratings. We had somebody ask last week, why do TV ratings matter? Well, this is like where some of the conversation happens. So if you're a fan of college football for the TV product and it being as streamlined and sleek as possible, you only watch the biggest games. You don't care about some random Big 12 matchup, then this is probably up your alley. But if you're somebody who cares about it beyond the mega matchups or just the power versus power schools all the time, then this is the worst idea you've heard in a really long time. So I guess it just depends on what side of the aisle you're on. But I don't know how realistic it is to begin with. It's interesting though.
I just can't see it working, and that's not me being negative about it. Because of where we are right now. Okay, a couple of notes on this. Expanding the playoffs and pitting blue blood powers more often against one another, and eliminating all games. Arrange more games between power conferences, eliminating all games against group of five and FCS opponents. And in other words, it means that your records may be different, which is maybe going to be the case anyway. Here's what teams get in return. Paul, you kind of mentioned that.
What it means is there's no FCS football at all.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. They would all, and then that right there might eliminate the SEC, because they like to tuck that one game at the end of the year against UT Chattanooga and others. Not that others don't play games like that, but mostly in September. Tier 1, 16 teams. Earn per school. Revenue projections of $130 million in year 4, escalating to $250 million in year 12. Tier 2 would be 22 schools between $60 and $110 million. similar to what the SEC and Big Ten are currently going to get. And then Tier 3, the remaining 32 schools earning projections of 30 to 60 million, similar to what the Big 12 and also the ACC rates might be. Now, Bob Thompson, our Bob Thompson, put this up. As he said he read as much of this as he could. Not surprisingly that these plans are hitting the street now. College sports are seen in peril by smart money people. They smell opportunity. I'll leave it at that until I see the actual proposal. I still think 70 is too big, but this quote is telling. The quote was, an upfront infusion of $5.3 billion in private capital borrowed from future media revenues, which again is what these private capital companies do, would provide schools immediate cash during a 3-year transition period, helping them buy out non-power opponents, supplementing their annual TV distribution.
Yeah, so that's why I think this one has more possibility than the other ones, because we've got actual dollar figures and all of that in it. But outside of that, like, you know, you get to these things where, all right, well, Greg Sankey's already said he doesn't want to do anything like this. And it said everybody would be drafting off the SEC, which is always comes back to my question about Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti in that, do they have the greater good of college sports at heart? Because if you did, you'd maybe want to have these other conferences in. After that, like, do we really want just what is the SEC and the Big Ten? I don't know. Or do we want a Super League? I don't think that we really do, but TV and Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are going to make that decision more than anybody else will. Another thing that, like I said, bothers me, but yeah, you have that money up front. It could allow, you know, runway for this. So this sounds like, because the people doing this are the ones who kind of understand it the most. Jack Swarbrick's a part of it, so he knows how to speak the conference commissioner language. But, you know, outside of all that, I still just don't think it's happening, because the Big Ten and SEC, it's not good enough for them.
Well, I mean, as best we can tell, we don't know. I mean, it's just that it sounds like it's probably not for them because they don't really need to worry about everybody else. Or have they shown any inclination they care about anybody else? Well, at least Sankey in particular. You were mentioning the tiers. Like, that should be also mentioned with the fact that relegation would be a part of this. Like, that's the whole – how the tiers would line up with how you get paid out. But it also says there would be a group of, like, 6 schools that would just remain at the top regardless.
Yeah.
And it's like Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, and like 2 other schools would just automatically be top tier no matter what at all times, because they're the 6 of the biggest brands. And it doesn't even include like Oklahoma or even teams that you would think would be certainly top 8. But that was interesting that you're basically like greasing their palms to get them to play, right? Is get the biggest brands on board by saying, hey, you're automatically in the elite no matter what ever happens to you. And so you'd get all the 6 biggest brands based on their metrics, you know, under this umbrella of this concept. And therefore you'd think everybody else would probably follow suit to follow the biggest brands. But yeah, there's a relegation part to this, which is just like reminding me of all these old Bill Connolly articles from years ago about, you know, trying to add relegation to college football, which, you know, I know soccer fans, it's a really cool idea for Premier League and Champions League. There's a lot of great concepts, and it's all very interesting. I know there's a lot of similarities. You can draw lines between college football and soccer in Europe and overseas, but, you know, I don't know. I don't know about that part, the relegation part. It just seems like it'd be hard to account for the ability to plan ahead very much. Unless I suppose you're getting all this money up front and then you're basically under a bubble. It's just you're bouncing around within that bubble to some different extent. That would make it easier than just the relegation on the surface of what it is now. Like, that would be impossible. Mm-hmm. You get dropped down and like, no, really, come play here. We promise if we get you and these other guys, we'll win enough games to get bumped back up to play like that. Just, I don't see how that would ever work under that idea. But under this idea, you're still under the umbrella technically. All the money's already there, so you're not like losing out on that. So there would be a way to spin that. But relegation a part of this. The
relegation, though, from what I read, is only financial in nature, and not like you're not dropping out to where you're going to be.
You're not going to drop where Boise State comes in or Memphis.
Yeah, it's
or
not.
I'm saying I've never
that.
liked the idea of relegation in college football because it doesn't make any sense. Because if you drop down like you do in soccer, then it's impossible to get back, basically, I would think, for most teams. But, yes, in this, the relegation is mentioned, but it's more of the financial, as you said. It's not like Baylor didn't win enough games, so now they're in the whatever tier, and they've got to win this many to get back in. Because you would never be able to recruit that way. So, yeah, that wouldn't be a part of this, which I do like, and I like the fact that any relegation would be financially. So everybody's still involved no matter what your win-loss is. You just don't make as much money, which I think is fair on the surface and could make that idea make some sense. It sounds, though, like a lot of good ideas and maybe not so good ideas that would be nicely cherry-picked and then maybe added to a different proposal down the line as we continue to kind of like curate the perfect solution ultimately that everybody ends up on the same place. Because this, to me, sounds like it's got some legs, but it doesn't sound like it's got enough to actually be the answer to all problems.
We will have Willie Fritz, Houston coach, in about 7 minutes, but it's something to chew on. I haven't really spent much time on it over the last few weeks because I wanted to see whether or not this House versus NCAA thing would at least move into gear number 2. It's done that, which it might now be down the road, and it's got on fire. One quick note from Brandon Marcello on all of this. I believe these concepts, Project Rudy and the G5 playoff Super League idea, will only inform the commissioners, ADs, and presidents so that they can go off and do it themselves without the need for private equity to take a piece of the pie. One thing about private equity, they can push money out now, but eventually the revenue you produce will have to go back to them in some ways in certain percentages to pay for their upfront cash. Now, a couple of awards to get to. Ashton Gente, we know what kind of a great run. I'm sorry, let's go to the Campbell Award first. Ashton Gente, according to theathletic.com with a story on this from earlier today, the Heisman odds for him have gone up. There's Travis Hunter. There's Cam Ward. Jalen Milroe still in that mix. And so you wonder, Milroe still in the mix because of maybe Georgia, but obviously not all that spectacular with what he did in the loss against Vanderbilt. So there are the latest odds that have bumped up. And Gente now, the kid from Boise State having a spectacular year, Barry Sanders too, so to speak, he now is in that mix at the top. But that is wide open, much more time to see what happens.
Yeah, I don't have a Heisman vote, you do. But to me, at this point in the season, it's a two-man race. Or three. I guess I'd throw Cam Ward in there right now. But those are my three right now is
that's going to
Hunter,
change.
Ward, and Gente.
But that will change with this weekend's game and then the next weekend's game. And so,
I mean, maybe not.
Well, what if, why not?
I mean, why would it have to change?
I said it could change with this weekend's games because you have Quinn Ewers back in the mix. He hadn't played in a while. As other guys that can join that list.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, it could very well be that again, though. Like, it might change. It very well has the potential to, but it might not. It might be those three guys. They might be the clear best this weekend and every weekend after. We'll see. There will be others that certainly contend for it, but if those are the three at the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Now, the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award. Kevin Jennings, the quarterback at SMU, after their really nice win against top 25 Louisville, put on a show. He's joined this show. In fact, last week, we sparked him to the performance he had to beat Louisville, 22nd ranked Louisville, and SMU continues to be on a heater.
Yeah, they do. I think it's just, I gave him, he wanted to perform well in front of me, and then that he did, and then I confirmed it to him. He's just inspired by me. One, ruining my day, and then backing it up so he ruins other people's days.
Maybe you should go talk to the Warpath Collective or whatever the hell their version of it is and try to extend an offer to Kevin Jennings to get a real quarterback in there.
Got eligibility left.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look, hey, if the Battle's End would return my calls.
Yeah. Battle's End. There you go.
Yeah.
One other note, Georgia with more trouble. Another player struggles. Colby Young arrested earlier today by Athens Clark County Police, a misdemeanor charge of battery and assault of an unborn child. If you read the police report, he and his girlfriend had met late Saturday night to discuss their relationship. It turned heated. She felt like he was on the phone with another girl. That then became an issue. And then as she tried to leave, according to the police report, He grabbed her, eventually started to pull at her abdomen, like squeeze her abdomen. And there you have the assault, battery and assault on an unborn child. She's pregnant. So he has been arrested. Not sure what happens from this point on, but the police report is pretty detailed on what Colby Young is allegedly to have done.
Well, if that's actually what happened, then I hope he gets his just due and finds himself inside of a cell for a while and is kicked off the Georgia football team. If it's not true, then I hope, whatever extent of the allegations were false or thrown back the other direction to the extent that they may. I mean, who's to know other than those people involved? So I hope just the truth, whatever that may be, allegations aside, is how this properly gets, punished or dealt with. But yeah, it's an ugly allegation, and I don't know. It's weird. I feel like we don't hear are college guys just not ever getting in trouble anywhere but Georgia nowadays, basically? Because I feel like we used to hear about stuff all the time, and we don't hear about anything anymore unless it's like Georgia football or the occasional thing maybe here and there. But I mean, guys getting arrested for pot and all sorts of stuff, like you hardly ever hear about any of that. Maybe it's just the laws have changed so it doesn't affect as many guys or whatever. But when we do hear about legal matters, it's always Georgia now. I mean, 99% of the time,
when
it's
you
Georgia.
go 46-3 and then you win national titles and you're at the top of the food chain, then yes, even though if this happened at another school, I won't mention one because that wouldn't be fair, it would still be in the news. But when you are at the top of the food chain and you have things happen, then that spotlight's on you even. And these are some pretty bad things. We know about the wreck. The injury, the police report, by the way, and Craig was mentioning this as far as if this occurred, the evidence that they have from pictures of her abdomen and the parts of her body where they say they do find bruises and other markings as well. So that remains to be seen to see what happens with him. But you're right. I think, though, if they were, I'm not going to mention a team, just a mid-level team or worse, it would still be a story. But it seems like Georgia right now is in that run. There's some other schools that have had great success. There seems to be a problem.
Well, I'm sorry for the player involved, even if he did it, that all of us college football fans just want them to lose so bad that we're making them commit crimes and be alleged to have done things.
Yeah,
it's all the outside's fault. We all just are envious of Kirby Smart and his dynasty. That's what I've been told by actual media people have tried to spin that. Oh, it's just people only care because they're jealous of Georgia football.
That's bullshit.
Oh no, it totally is.
That's not.
It totally is.
Like somebody woke up and told him, "Hey, Colby, we don't like you. Go do
No, it
something
wasn't this
like
particular story. It was during all the drunken driving stuff, and it was like, oh, well, people only care because you're rivals of Georgia. And I was like, man, that is total BS. But nevertheless, I'm not surprised given where I saw that, and I'm sure this will be treated much the same way until, it'll just be treated that way until something actually so messed up happens that you have no choice but to change your stance on it. But hopefully that all works itself out and the right parties are dealt with accordingly.